Hi there, welcome back to my YouTube channel Watch by Ashley. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I want to spend some time reviewing one of 2022's most ambitious films, and that is George Miller's 3,000 Years of Longing. This film stars Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba in the lead roles, and I have to tell you, the film is visually stunning 90% of the time. So this will be a spoiler-free review, and I will share my thoughts in terms of what I think worked for the film and what didn't. And if you've seen the film already, please let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed it. So let's get into it. The film is directed by George Miller, and he actually co-wrote the screenplay. It's loosely based off of the novel The Djinn in the Nightingale's Eye, and that was released about almost 30 years ago. And this is not a new concept at all. I think through Disney we're all familiar with jinns or genies granting wishes. But what is refreshing here is that we're actually given a chance to connect emotionally to the djinn. He tells us a bit of his story. So he shares 3 experiences that he's had in terms of masters that he's cared for and how it's impacted him. So it's a very nice performance by Idris Elba as the djinn. This is definitely not Will Smith's genie. It's a very raw and very deep performance. It's definitely not for children, it's an adult's tale. And I really did like the way that they chose to present the genie or the djinn. It's not the typical way that you've seen in previous iterations. And in terms of the plot, we're introduced to Tilda Swinton's character, Alethea. Alethea is a literary scholar, and she specializes in folklore, fairy tales, myths, legends, any type of storytelling. That's what she's very passionate about. And she uses stories as a form of escapism. You know, she is very devoted to her career. She doesn't have any children. She doesn't have a spouse. So this is her main focus. And she's gone to Istanbul to give a lecture. And while in Istanbul, unbeknownst to her, she's actually guided to a bottle that contains a djinn at a bazaar. And she takes the bottle back to her hotel and accidentally releases the djinn. When she meets the djinn, he of course wants to grant her the 3 wishes so he can get his freedom. And she, being the brilliant scholar that she is, tells the djinn that she's not interested. She knows that wish granting can go terribly wrong, and she's actually happy in her life. Or so she says, right? So the djinn, of course, has a feeling that there's more to Althea, and he decides to share with her a bit about him. And that's where we get to see his 3 stories. And I have to tell you, the depiction in the 3 stories is fantastic. It's like the colors are so vibrant. The costumes are great. Everything is just such a visual experience, you know. It's definitely the best part of the film is during those 3 stories. So all the credit goes to George Miller there. Like he had a vision, he executed it perfectly in those scenes. And in terms of the plot, for the most part, it's definitely fantastic. There are some great themes that are expressed in the film, especially when it comes to Alethea and her dealing with her loneliness and telling herself that she's happy. I think that's very relatable. As we get more developed in society, women tend to have kids at a later age, or they just pursue their careers and sometimes don't even have kids, and they convince themselves that pursuing their career was worth it. But it doesn't change the fact that she's very lonely, no matter how many times she tells herself that she's happy. So I found that to be a very relatable and relevant theme, especially because it's kind of happening more and more common where women are not having children and they're living lives on their own. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just goes to show you that like not everyone who says that they're happy is actually happy. Another theme that's explored in the film is that technology, you know, like it's done such great wonders for us, right? But it's also taken away the tradition of storytelling. And we don't believe in things anymore like we used to because it's been explained away through science. And the djinn kind of points out that, you know, you only exist if people believe in you. And mythical creatures like ghosts and jinns and other forms of gods and mythology, they're slipping out of existence in our minds because we no longer rely on them. We no longer use stories in the Bible, the Torah, the Quran to help us cope with our day-to-day lives. And I think that one of the messages is that our lives are less fulfilled because we don't take part in storytelling. We don't use our imaginations. We don't believe in anything anymore. And it takes away from the richness of life. And I did like that thought and that theme being explored. What I didn't like, however, is that parts of the film had plot holes. And yes, there's some parts where you can make assumptions and fill in some gaps, but I generally do feel like this film was poorly edited. The film was poorly edited, and where it suffers visually, like I mentioned before, is in terms of the graphics in the opening scene with the Jinn when he appears to Alethea. He's behind her filling up the room, but the green screen is just not great, and the shadowing is very distracting because it's not consistent with the scene. And so with the editing and the graphics, the film felt unfinished and unpolished, and I thought that was such a shame because George Miller, like I said, those 3 stories from the Jinn's perspective, phenomenally done. Like some of the scenes are breathtaking, especially the effects that he used for the smoke or vapor. Like it's beautiful, it's stunning, but just other parts are just not done properly. And it makes you scratch your head because it had a $60 million budget, phenomenal director, and it just feels like somewhere along the line, either the editor or the special effects, they dropped the ball. George Miller treats you with some very fantastic and stunning images here in this film, but it just falls apart and is taken away by literally 2 minutes of poor editing, and that's just such a shame, especially when you have a $60 million budget. To have the movie feel unfinished and improperly edited, it's just a real crying shame. And you had such amazing performances by Idris, Elba, and Tilda Swinton. They have great chemistry, and it just feels kind of like a waste in a movie when, first of all, you don't have the viewership. Like, the turnout was less than $20 million worth in the box office. And it's hard to recommend this film, especially when you have, like I said, it doesn't feel completely polished. But for the hard work that was put into it, I feel like it does deserve some attention, some praise. I feel like we're sending the wrong message because we're just encouraging studios to continue making reboots or spin-offs or continue making comic book movies as their big budget films. And by not having this film be supported, it just proves that, right? But then, again, like I said, it's hard to recommend it when it's unedited. When it's not properly edited. So that's a very big conflict I had when it came to reviewing this film, is that some parts were amazing, but then I can also see why some people would not want to see the film. So those are my thoughts. Please let me know in the comments below if you've seen the film, if you enjoyed it. And if you have any recommendations or want to connect with me, you can reach out to me on Instagram at watchbyashley. And otherwise, that's all I have for you today, and I will see you next time.